What if I told you that Ferrari hasn't understood its car all season, and that Hamilton had to come along to reveal the true potential of the SF25? Qualifying in Mexico not only changed the championship, it changed the team's internal perception of its own car. Ferrari did not expect what happened on Saturday, October 25, 2025, at the Autodromo Hermanos Rodriguez. After 19 weekends of ups and downs, frustrations, and endless technical adjustments, the SF25 seemed to have reached its peak. The dominant narrative within the team was that the car simply had structural limitations that kept it from contention for pole positions. But in a matter of a single classification, Hamilton shattered that belief with a punch of reality. The third place achieved by the Briton was, on the surface, a positive result. But internally, it was interpreted as a disruption, because it wasn't just the position on the grid, it was how he got it. On a circuit where extreme altitude compromises engine power and aerodynamic efficiency, and where the track demands millimeter temperature management, Hamilton managed to extract the maximum from the SF25. Just 0.352 seconds from pole position, his lap was precise, clean, and above all, unexpected. What triggered the commotion was what subsequent data revealed. Telemetry showed that the car had more potential than Ferrari had believed for much of the year. And the most disturbing thing, that performance had not come from Charles Leclerc, who was supposed to be the driver best suited to the car. He had left Hamilton, the same Hamilton who, until weeks before, was struggling to stay within the top 10. That contrast sparked uncomfortable conversations in the hallways of Maranello. Had they been misreading information all season? Or had they simply not had the right driver to push the car to its limits? The answers were not immediate, but qualifying in Mexico forced a total reevaluation of the team's technical approach. Furthermore, it made it clear that the problem was not only the car itself, but how its dynamic behavior was being interpreted. Hamilton wasn't just fast, he was efficient in every micro-decision. And that, in Formula One, is what separates a problematic car from a competitive one. The fact that the SF25 performed so well under their hands shook the internal narrative that they were doomed to be the third team in performance. The surprise was not that Hamilton had a good Saturday. The real surprise was that, after months of doubts, he turned on the light that revealed everything that Ferrari had not been able to see for herself. And that, more than any result, was what really shook the Italian team. During free practice for the Mexican Grand Prix, Ferrari had already noticed a slight improvement in the performance of the SF25. However, no one in Maranello anticipated what was about to be witnessed. In FP2, Hamilton finished fifth, just 0.3 off the best time. In FP3, he rose to second place. At first glance, it seemed like a positive evolution, but still within what would be considered normal. But then the classification arrived, and with it, the data that would completely change Ferrari's narrative in 2025. When Hamilton crossed the line and set the third fastest time of the day, the numbers seemed reasonable. The disconcerting thing came later. Ferrari engineers, reviewing the telemetry, noted that the SF25 had reached performance peaks that had not been recorded in any of the previous 19 classifications. Previous simulations did not contemplate that type of consistency, nor that level of aerodynamic and mechanical precision in critical sectors. In particular, there were two pieces of information that had a profound impact. The first, the thermal stability of the tires. Despite the fact that the asphalt in Mexico City was close to 48 degrees and that the altitude reduced aerodynamic pressure by 20%, Hamilton kept the Pirelli compounds within their ideal operating window throughout the fastest lap. This is something that Ferrari had tried unsuccessfully to replicate on circuits with similar characteristics during the season. Hamilton, on the other hand, made it look simple. His way of heating the tires, his way of modulating corner entry and exit, and even his progressive traction in low adhesion areas were executed with a level of mechanical synchrony that the team had not seen before. The second piece of information was even more revealing. The sectors where Hamilton lost time compared to Norris and Leclerc were extremely specific, limited almost exclusively to turns 1 and 2. In these two areas, Norris's McLaren and Leclerc's Ferrari showed slightly better frontal grip, probably due to a more aggressive setup on the front axle. But from turn 3 onwards, and especially in the stadium sector and the fast S of sector 2, Hamilton's SF25 was simply impeccable. Not only did he equal, but he surpassed the cornering speeds of his rivals, something that had not been seen in the entire championship. What was alarming for Ferrari was not that Hamilton had a good lap. It was discovering that the car, under optimal driving conditions, was more competitive than its own simulation and analysis tools had projected. And that opened a chasm of technical questions. Were they calibrating the sensors wrong? Had they misinterpreted the thermal degradation patterns? Was the correlation between the wind tunnel and the track out of date? But perhaps the most disturbing question was this: what other opportunities had they missed during the season because they didn't understand their car correctly? Hamilton's lap was not simply fast. It was a quiet demonstration of what Ferrari could have been all year. The data that unleashed everything was not a specific number, but a sequence of empirical evidence that proved, without a doubt, that the SF25 had more life than previously believed. The only thing missing was someone who knew how to wake her up, and that person was Lewis Hamilton. Hamilton's performance in Mexico was not magic. It was not an isolated flash. It was the final result of a silent transformation that began weeks ago when the season seemed to be heading towards oblivion. After the Austin Grand Prix, a concern arose within Ferrari. If they did not do something radical, Hamilton would end its first year in the red as a media disappointment, and the SF25 as one of the biggest conceptual failures since the team's dark years. But what Ferrari did was not visible from the outside. This wasn't a major aerodynamic upgrade. There was no new front spoiler, nor a revolutionary diffuser. What was changed was more profound, the way the car mechanically interacted with the track. The key change was philosophical, not visual. Ferrari started working on the base of the setup. They modified the suspension stiffness values, adjusted the weight distribution, and reconfigured the car's rake, that is, the longitudinal inclination between the front and rear axle. This latter decision, which affects how airflow behaves beneath the flat bottom, was instrumental in improving the SF25's stability in fast corners, one of its chronic weaknesses throughout the season. Furthermore, the car's dynamic balance was completely revised. Hamilton had stated on several occasions that he did not feel connected to the car, that the car did not speak to him. For a pilot like him, that intuitive connection is vital. So the team focused on adapting the car to his driving style rather than forcing Hamilton to adapt to the machine. It was then that the front suspension geometry was redefined, allowing it to attack with more confidence in slow corners without compromising stability in quick changes of direction. But the real turning point came with a series of almost invisible modifications implemented specifically for the Mexican Grand Prix: cooling. Maranello understood that the Mexico City circuit not only punishes aerodynamic efficiency due to the altitude, but also puts brake systems and power units under extreme stress. Therefore, Ferrari installed new, more aggressive cooling panels on the engine cover, enlarged the hot air vents in the body, and redesigned the rear brake ducts. These were not modifications aimed at immediate performance, but rather at guaranteeing operational stability in limit conditions. And they worked. Because for the first time this year, the SF25 was able to maintain optimal working temperatures without compromising the car's overall efficiency. Furthermore, this evolution coincided with something intangible but essential: team morale. Fred Vasseur had acknowledged that halting development of the car in June was a psychological rather than a technical error. The team stagnated emotionally. But in Mexico, a different atmosphere was felt, one of silent reconstruction, a feeling that, perhaps, all was not lost. And that belief was manifested on the track through a driver who never stopped pushing. Hamilton not only found rhythm thanks to technical changes, he drove them himself. Qualifying in Mexico was not just a fast lap. It was a cry of affirmation. It was the moment when Hamilton stopped being the new guy at Ferrari and became its reference. Every curve he drew that Saturday with millimeter precision was not simply a technical movement, it was a gesture of confidence. From someone who, after 19 weekends of adjustments, mistakes, and doubts, finally felt that the car was an extension of his body. After the session, his words were clear: "I'm very happy to be in the top 3. It's taken me all year to get here, but I'm finally fitting in with everything around me." That phrase, seemingly simple, contains a brutal truth: that Hamilton has had to dismantle everything he knew, relearn from scratch, and rebuild himself as a driver in an environment that was unfamiliar to him. That process, invisible to fans, is one of the most difficult in any champion's career. Qualifying for the 2025 Mexican Grand Prix was not just a good session for Lewis Hamilton. It was a revelation, a breaking point. Because when a driver finds that moment of perfect connection between his talent and the machine he drives, what happens goes beyond stopwatches. Do you think that Mexico was the beginning of a historic comeback for Hamilton with Ferrari, or simply an isolated flash in the middle of a sea of uncertainties? Leave me your opinion. I want to know what you think about all this.